you all know, of course, Newt Gingrich. He has come to address this because this existential threat to freedom is, I know, on top of his mind. And he has been doing, through both his sort of public ministries on Fox and in many other outlets, and of course through his contacts with the President of the United States and other leaders of our country, his level best to raise awareness of this problem of the present danger with China, the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm absolutely thrilled that he's been able to find a very few minutes to join us to talk about some of those concerns here today. Speaker Gingrich, I know you've got a hard stop right about the top of the hour, so we're going to ask you to come, shoot, and scoot, as they say. Welcome.
Well, let me just say, first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to have Frank's continuing leadership on national security issues, and I think this is a very important initiative in that direction. I'm just going to say 3 or 4 quick things and then maybe take a couple questions. Let me start by saying that I think that the first thing I want to emphasize is that Xi Jinping is the chairman of the Military Commission, the Secretary General of the Communist Party, and the president of the People's Republic of China. And if you remember that it's in that order. The Military Commission gives him control of the People's Liberation Army, which is explicitly a wing of the party, not the government. The role of Secretary General gives him 89 million members. By contrast, Trump got 63 million votes. So he has a cadre across the whole country of 89 million people. And the number one duty of the Chinese system is the preservation of the party. And anybody who doesn't understand that completely misunderstands what's going on. And third, as long as you remember that he has the military and the party, he's also the president of the country. Now, all of our Western media and our diplomats tend to think of him as president, which puts him in the context of a Western traditional system, which he's not. So that's just my first observation. My second observation is that everybody who really wants to understand this, and I frankly got this from Kissinger's book on China, and I've since been following it up, and I really believe it's true. Everybody who would really like to understand this should learn how to play Go. The difference between Go and chess is so radical, and Go is so much more reflective of Chinese styles of warfare, and so much reflects the period of the Warring States and the period before that, that it's really worth your looking at, and then it's worth your, after you get in the rhythm of Go, going back and rereading Sun Tzu and realizing how dramatically different it is from Clausewitz. The Western world with chess basically has an offensive system of taking pieces, and our military, for example, tends to think very heavily in kinetic terms of fighting battles and winning wars. What Go teaches you, and what Sun Tzu and much of the writing of the ancient period teaches you, is that victory is actually the goal. And as Sun Tzu says, the greatest of all generals win bloodless victories. Fighting's not the goal. Victory is. So if you apply the pattern of Go, and if you apply the principles of Sun Tzu, there are 3 case studies right now, and we're losing all 3, which are very useful models to look at. And my newsletter, which will come out tomorrow, suggests that the insanity of the American news media is a major part of our current problem, because you can look at their coverage of things that are utterly silly, and then look at the absence of their coverage of things that may be life and death. So I'll just give you 3 examples of grand strategic effort that make perfect sense under the Chinese model. The first is the South China Sea, which begins in the 1930s when the Kuomintang issues the 9-dash line, which in essence sets the precedent for claiming that virtually all of the South China Sea is Chinese territory, which would thereby vitiate the whole concept of the international law of the sea, because it's now arguing this is not an international sea anymore. This is a Chinese sea. Now, they followed up on that, and then this is a long Chinese tradition. I mean, there's a lot of parallel between the Kuomintang and the Chinese communists. They were both trained by the Soviets. The Whampoa University for Chiang Kai-shek was literally staffed originally by the Soviets. They both believed in a Leninist model of centralized party hierarchy. And so in a lot of ways, beyond fighting a civil war, they were actually the same gang fighting a civil war because they wanted power. But they were not nearly as different as our news coverage would have had you believe. In that setting, the Chinese came in and said, you know, we're going to build a few islands, but they're all peaceful. Oh, and we may put airfields on them, but they'll be peaceful. Oh, and we might put a port there, but it'll be peaceful. Oh, well, we have to put in some anti-aircraft systems because we don't trust you. But they're peaceful anti-aircraft systems. And we may bring an occasional ship in to prove that we can take care of ourselves, but that's because of you. After all, you should be over in San Diego or somewhere, but you insist on being over here. And so what they've done is they've gradually begun to establish facts, all of which are invidious to our interest. Second example, the entire Bridge and Road Initiative. As many of you know, my wife is currently the ambassador to the Vatican. So we get to live in Rome. And it's a brutal assignment, but as a citizen, I'm prepared to help. I'm trying to be supportive of Callista in serving the country. But recently, Xi Jinping came to Italy and signed a contract to run Genoa, which is the largest port in Italy, and a contract to run Trieste, which is the port which opens up the space to go to Austria and southern Germany. Now, in the Cold War, if the Soviets had opened up 2 ports in Italy, we would all have understood this was catastrophic. Now you can't even get it covered because we have some guy in Chicago who pays people to beat him up so he can claim that it's an anti-Trump event. And we have in the article I did tomorrow, the number of minutes the news media devoted to this insanity was unbelievable. But it fits the infantile nature of the current news media. So people don't even realize in this country that what you're watching is a gradual rolling offensive of enormous sophistication. They also, by the way, have a contract to run the port of Piraeus in Greece. So and the reason Trieste matters is it takes 1 week off of delivering Chinese freight to South Germany. So you're watching a revolution in strategic economic capabilities and a revolution in geographic location of power. And all of it's being done while we sleepwalk. The third example, which I've been deeply involved in, is 5G and Huawei. We are literally crazy in dealing with this. 5G matters because, as Samsung has a great sign that says 5G, 5th generation, is to 4G as a computer is to a typewriter. It takes 6 to 7 minutes to download a movie in 4G. It takes 3 seconds in 5G. It is the key to rural America getting broadband. It makes possible everything from autonomous vehicles to distance surgery. It will be central to the battlefield of the future. Our companies are so out of sync. I mean, take AT&T, which is currently lying about this whole thing. And the reason they're lying is simple. They took $85 billion and they bought Time Warner. For $85 billion, they could have leapfrogged Huawei and we'd be the dominant internet country in the world. But now that they're the most indebted American corporation, they can't afford to go to 5G. And they're desperate that nobody else go to 5G. And for the last 4 months, I've been in a knockdown, drag-out fight in the White House and in the Defense Department. To go to 5G in America, you have to have an amount of capability from the Defense Department. There's no other place that has enough. And we have bureaucrats in the Defense Department who for the last 4 months have dug their heels in. And so what you get is the domestic companies will tell you, well, we're not doing badly here. Well, first of all, we've blocked Huawei from being here. But they missed the whole point. Huawei's now in 60 or 70 countries. Now, how are you going to operate worldwide if virtually every country in the world has a Chinese internet system? And we are truly, totally out of sync with reality. So I came here, I have a very simple model. We are right now, if you draw the comparison with the Cold War, we are right now in the period just before Kennan wrote the long telegram. We haven't had a wake-up call. We don't understand what the problem is. We don't understand what the scale of the response is going to have to be. And we are losing. I mean, anybody who tells you we are not losing is simply misinformed. And this is an enormous problem. This is going to be a long-term struggle between a civilization that believes in liberty and a civilization that believes in authoritarianism with Chinese characteristics. And these are civilizational fights. These aren't countries. And we currently have no political basis for thinking through and understanding what we're doing. So that's what I'm up to. That's why I wanted to go out of the way and come by for a little bit.
Thank you, Newt.
Can I give you 10 minutes? Can you take some questions? I can take 10 minutes.
Speaker, thank you for that extraordinary wake-up call and the willingness to take some questions. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, member of the Committee on the Present Danger of China. Let me get a mic to Peter, please. Right here, next to you. There you go.
Well, I don't have a question, Speaker Gingrich, but I wanted to congratulate you for on 26 March, President Trump signing the executive order to protect our nation from electromagnetic pulse. You know, this is a personal victory. Your vision and leadership, when there was almost no one speaking about this, you were the one of the few political leaders who brought this to national attention, including being the first person in a presidential debate when you were running for president to raise this issue, for which the New York Times, tried to, and headlines tried to mock you and all the rest. But your vision and courage finally made this happen. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for listening to the scientists and strategists who for 20 years have been trying to make this happen. It wouldn't have happened without you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond?
No.
Peter,
I said thank you. What else can? When a guy's that positive, don't mess it up.
Don't get in the way.
Mr. Speaker, Peter Husey from the Air Force Association. Roger Robinson, former chairman, as you know, the Congressional China Commission, says there's 700 Chinese companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
Very few of them have done the due diligence required to say who owns you, who owns your stock, what are you up to. There is an SEC office, that's meant to say, hey, you don't get listed unless you do this. Would you please help?
Yes.
Get these, because
to
they're raising the cash to use to modernize their military.
I talked to Roger yesterday afternoon, yes.
Super.
And that, by the way, is one of the 70 or 80 or 90 things we need to be doing. But it's a good example.
Chris Hall, also a member of the Committee on the Present Danger of China.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to be able to speak with you again. My name is Christopher Hall. I'm with the Epoch Times, writing a piece on this. I was wondering if you could address, at the same time that we are trying to wake up the country to the threat of communist China, we have as a Democratic frontrunner a self-acclaimed socialist who spent the Cold War apparently singing the national anthem of the USSR in Moscow, and we have in Congress an open socialist who is advocating something that looks very much like the Great Leap Forward in China's history, which starved untold millions of people to death. Could you address any links that you see between the fight with China and the fight with that same ideology here in the United States?
Sure. I mean, my view is that Ronald Reagan defeated communism in Moscow but lost to it at Stanford. It's that simple. I mean, you have an academic left that pervades the whole system. You have reporters who grow out of the academic left who pervade the whole system. You've had 3 generations now of teaching people lies. And so you have the natural result. And the only long-term healthy answer in a free society is you got to go beat them. You have to turn. I believe there's a chance that next year will resemble 1972 because these people verge on being crazy. And I think the average American's not crazy. They may at times be sort of passive and let people babble for a while, but in the end they have a tendency not to vote for self-immolation.
Thank God. Rick Fisher.
Rick Fisher with the
Also
International
member of
Assessment
our
and
committee.
Strategy Center. Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Speaker. When the Chinese want to organize for victory, especially long-term victory, Taiwan against the United States, for example, they organize something called a leading group that brings together all the stakeholders across their government, intelligence, military system, and they all talk to each other and they go forward. Is there a lesson in that for the United States? Is it time for us to consider that we're not at all organized for this coming present conflict?
Sure. And I actually had coffee with about a dozen U.S. senators this morning, and that topic came up because neither the House nor the Senate is organized. I mean, if you take the example of Huawei and 5G, it probably covers 7 or 8 different major government agencies. It covers probably 3 or 4 Senate and House committees. So there's no natural center of energy and center of knowledge to organize. And I think very much as we had to get organized in the 30s to stop un-American activities, which people tend to forget originally was an anti-Nazi committee, or as we had to get organized in terms of creating the CIA, the Strategic Air Command, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. We're going to go through the same cycle here. I think my only point as a historian is we're in phase 1 where we have to have a big argument. This will be part of the 2020 election. Do you think China is a threat or not? Do you think the United States should, in fact, decide that it does not want a Chinese internet dominating the planet or not? And you really want to have NATO partners, just as we have Chancellor Merkel selling out to Putin on natural gas. We now have the Italians selling out to Xi Jinping on running ports. At what point do we need to develop a more robust diplomacy and a more robust foreign policy that takes them head on? 1 or 2 more questions.
I think you're getting the cane. If you're willing to take 1 or 2 more, we've got 1 or 2 more to give you.
Okay.
Sasha Gong, also a member of our committee.
I'm a big fan of Rendezvous with History.
Oh, thank you.
Here's what, I wonder if you can talk to the White House. I came from China, and I was a political prisoner there in the 70s. The main difference between the China threat now and the Soviet threat at that time was, at that time, the United States and the free world want the people in China, in the Eastern Bloc, in Soviet Union, want their mind and hearts. And I remember so vividly in the 1980s, the United States was an icon. Nowadays, what happens is that you saw China try very hard and quite successful to want the mind and heart of people in the free world. And just look at schools, how many professors thought China was a better country. So what do you think the United States should do?
Well, I think, first of all, Diana West wrote a great book on American betrayal. And if you go back and you look, remember, in the 30s, we had to defeat Nazi sympathizers. In the 40s and 50s, we had to defeat Soviet sympathizers. I mean, Reagan becomes an active anti-communist after a Screen Actors Guild meeting when he goes out and has a drink with a friend of his who's a genuine communist who says, not only am I a Stalinist, but if we take over, we're either going to lock you up or kill you. And Reagan goes home that night and thinks, this guy's really sincere. Okay? I mean, but that's how these things occur. So we're going to have to go back through another round. I mean, I just remind everybody, if you think these are nice people, look at the Uyghurs. I asked a Chinese leader to explain to me their million-person concentration camps of Uyghurs, and he said, well, think of them better as schools that room and board. They're not really concentration camps. We're trying to help them learn Chinese. I mean, now, a person who can say that with a straight face is a genuinely dangerous person. I am going to have to run. I'm getting yelled at over here. It's quiet yelling, but I can feel it. Let me just say, I think, Frank, what you and your team are doing is vital. I think free societies have to educate themselves, have to think through the response, have to aggressively implement. I am tactically very, very worried, but strategically, having survived Wilhelmine Germany, Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union, I'm reasonably confident that in the very long run, we will have a greater capacity to respond than will any totalitarian dictatorship, even one with a 5,000-year history. Thank you all very, very much.